I'm Melanie Carlos, and I'm Executive Director of Partnership for Extraordinary Minds. In a minute, we're going to get to our presentation, Bridging the Divide, Controversial Conversations about Autism. But before we dive in, I just have a few quick notes. First, I want to point out that this meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the X-Minds YouTube channel. We're also offering simultaneous translation for the Spanish speakers in the audience. Our social media coordinator, Ana Juarez, will explain how to access the Spanish audio channel. Ana?
Hola, buenas tardes y gracias por estar aquí con nosotros esta tarde para escuchar esta presentación en español. Por favor, diríjase al menú donde dice más. Ahí va a encontrar un icono en forma de como globo del mundo que dice interpretación. Haga clic ahí y escoja español. Y entonces se podrá escuchar esta presentación con nuestros intérpretes. Y si tiene alguna pregunta, por favor, déjenoslo saber. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Ana. So I'm so glad. It looks like everyone's logging in now, and I'm sure there are new faces in the crowd, and I want to let you know a little bit about who we are. We are X-Minds, the Partnership for Extraordinary Minds, and we're a parent-led autism nonprofit. We collaborate with families, educators, and providers to enhance educational outcomes for autistic students in Montgomery County, Maryland. At X-Minds, we're all about connection and support. From this monthly speaker series to 5 unique virtual parent discussion groups, we're here to help families navigate special education. We also host several in-person events, including a monthly playground meetup for families with young children. And for families with older children, we have several teen social events coming up. I do want to highlight a special event. It's at the end of this month on May 31st. With the help of our friends at the Autism Society of Maryland, we're excited to offer our first ever Transition to Adulthood clinic. So that's Saturday, May 31st from 10 to 1 at Montgomery Blair High School in Silver Spring. For those of you who have kids 14 and older, I'm sure you know how confusing it is applying for disability services. This event will include individual one-to-one consultations with a professional designed to help parents navigate applications for disability benefits and services like DOORS, DDA, and SSI. We will also feature disability expert Ken Jorgensen, who will be giving presentations at 10:15 and 11:45. And there will be plenty of resource tables featuring local community providers as well as staff to help you individually if you bring your laptop or your application and you want to get some help and guidance. So this is just a small sample of what we do throughout the entire year. And remember, all our events are free of charge. You can explore everything we offer on our website at xminds.org. And now on to tonight's special event and our 2 guest speakers. Meghan Ashburn is the mother of 2 autistic sons. She is an educational consultant, parent mentor, and advocate. She is passionate about helping schools create more inclusive, accessible environments. Her online book club has over 15,000 members, and her blog, Not an Autism Mom, is a wonderful collection of resources, book lists, and guest posts. Jules Edwards is a neurodivergent parent of neurodivergent children. She is a writer, consultant, and advocate who shares her lived experience through her website, Autistic Typing. Her perspective bridges her roles as both self-advocate and parent. Experiencing disability through multiple lenses has helped her to help others. Meghan and Jules co-authored I Will Die on This Hill. The point of this wonderful book is to spark conversations about how autistic adults and parents of autistic children can work together. The book leans into difficult conversations in hopes that people will be inspired to learn more and take action. We're delighted to have them with us tonight to talk about how multiple perspectives can enrich our understanding of autism. I should point out that tonight's program is a departure from our usual format in that there will be no formal presentations. So there are no slides. It will be Meghan and Jules speaking and engaging in a podcast style discussion, addressing issues within the autism community, and then they will moderate any further questions and comments you might have. Our X-Minds program assistant, Daniel, will also provide helpful info throughout the session in the chat. This is meant to be interactive, so don't be shy and speak up. So now it's my pleasure to welcome Meghan and Jules.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, thank you for that introduction.
Yes, thank you, Melanie.
Yeah,
Long time no talk, Meghan.
I know, right? Well, I was gonna say we have a lot of questions that we already got ahead of time, and if you have a question, you're here and you want to put it in the chat, please do. Like, we are definitely open to discussing things that are on your mind, like as a participant. But I was thinking that I would do the first question to you, Jules.
To me?
Yeah, are you ready?
Absolutely not. Yeah, yes, I am. Um, okay, so we actually got like a couple of sheets of questions, and X-Minds was like nice enough to kind of consolidate them so we have some common themes to talk about.
I wanted to pick your question.
Oh, you want to pick my question?
Yes.
Okay, well, you go ahead and do that.
Well, because I really actually want to know your thoughts and your answers on this question. So,
Okay.
there's no lack of hot topics about autism right now. Many families are very concerned with RFK Jr.'s stuff about finding a cure by September, or creating a registry, and maybe finding environmental causes and all. I can't even summarize all of it is, but I'd like to know what your thoughts are on that topic.
I would
And you
like to
go.
replace I would like to replace the person who is holding the office of HHS director because he doesn't know what he's talking about at all. Um, it's pretty bad and there's a lot to talk about. So he said some really stigmatizing things. And he has said some really nonsensical stuff. So for me, my particular brand of autism really likes it when words and actions match. And his words and actions do not match because when he said we would know the cause of autism by September, I also know that he has removed funding for a lot of research projects. So there's not actually a way that we can find a single cause of autism by September. There's been ongoing research for literal decades, and in order to set a deadline like that, like that's not how science works. We don't get to say by a certain date we'll know, we'll have a result. So scientifically it doesn't make sense, right? It definitely doesn't make sense because he's removing funding from research projects like the NIH and Autistic Women and Non-Binary Network, and several other research projects have lost all of their funding since the new administration took charge and decided not to comply with existing laws that Congress passed to fund these projects. And the grants were already awarded and the money was taken back. So I don't know how his logic works, but it's not real logic. It's not like it doesn't make sense. It's nonsensical. So no, we will not know a single cause of autism by September. We but we already, have a general idea. Primarily it's genetic, primarily it's heritable, meaning that, you inherit it from a parent. And sometimes it can be epigenetic, meaning that we have the genes in our body that switch on and off. So some people who have the gene that causes autism may not be autistic because they didn't have some kind of environmental interaction that switched it.
Can
And
you
that's
speak, hold on. So can you
Yeah.
speak to like his phrasing of it being such an epidemic and there were not any kids before? Can you speak to that narrative? Because that narrative is not just he is talking about that. That narrative has been going on since I started learning and way before that. Can you speak to that narrative about like the drastic increase?
Yeah. So what's kind of interesting is the largest growing group of new diagnoses is people who are ages 25 to 34 right now. So that's not showing our kids are being diagnosed. Like it's not like generationally there's more and more kids. We're getting better at identifying autism in people. And the more that people learn, the more they're able to ask for help, and get a diagnosis or get an evaluation and a diagnosis, etc. But it's not an epidemic. It's always existed. We can look in history and, suspect certain people were autistic. So my biological father was born in the 60s, I think, 1960s. And when he was a child, he was diagnosed with childhood schizophrenia. And that's how they diagnosed autism back then. It existed. But then also we look at the problem of inclusion and segregation and isolation. Like for older generations of people, so say like, well, probably like 60, 70-year-old, etc. They probably didn't know many autistic kids when they were growing up, or disabled kids in general, especially kids with significant support needs, kids with intellectual disability, because they were all in institutions. So it's probably true they didn't see it, but that's part of one of the problems with segregating, having separate classrooms, having separate lives for disabled kids from typically developing or abled kids. So I understand that perspective, but it's not an accurate representation of facts because it's like this anecdotal thing. Well, I never saw this when I was growing up. Yes, because the systems didn't include disabled people into everyday life.
And someone made a follow-up question about like how can we push back on that narrative? Like how can one do that? And I've heard you say one of them is, the DSM didn't even have an autism diagnosis a couple decades ago. I can't remember which one started with the autism diagnosis, but before then it was not an autism diagnosis. They had, childhood schizophrenia, other things, other diagnoses.
Yep. And then also I want to speak to, and this kind of ties into another really important question that we got that you'll be answering shortly, Megan. But I want to speak to the problem with stigmatizing higher support needs kids, because it is a very specific segment of our community that's being attacked by this current administration. And it is the higher support needs people. It is autistic kids, autistic adults who have co-occurring conditions like apraxia of speech or they're non-speaking. It's people with co-occurring intellectual disability. It's a lot of very targeted ways of saying that they're devaluing a person's life, and it's not okay. So I don't know how we can push back other than like share accurate information and let people know, like, no, autistic people have always existed. We're just now learning about like, hey, this is what's going on. Like life isn't just really hard for no reason. That was me pre-diagnosis. I was always like, why is everything so hard for no reason? But now I know the reason, because the world is not really set up for autistic people um, to live the way they want to live. Um, yeah, it's super damaging though, and it's infuriating. And I don't know how to reason with people like that too much. I do try to provide accurate information. I try not to get too emotionally involved in it because it's not worth it. Like in a one-on-one conversation or whatever. Um, but when it comes to like policy stuff, like RFK's ideas and hateful statements and whatnot, that's super dysregulating. And this registry is
I
absolute
was gonna
crap.
say, so we've been hearing about registries. I feel like we've been hearing about them at least since I can remember. It's been one registry or another, and then now he's talking about a registry. What historically, if you're looking at history, what could those registries be useful for?
Eugenics. I mean, that's really what they're useful for. Um, they're it's not going to be used to research causes. There's already studies that exist for that, like the Spark study. But he's looking for something that he can manipulate to say vaccines cause autism because that is his predetermined conclusion, and he's going to announce that in September. We can anticipate that. But the registry is really just a way to put targets on people's backs to decide who is valuable to them and who is not valuable to them. And of course, we can't predict the outcomes, but we can speculate. Of course, we're dealing with the huge problem with deporting immigrants and apparently now U.S. citizens, especially like migrant workers. The current administration is lying about immigrants quite a bit, accusing pretty much everyone of being a gang member, just making stuff up. Actually, was it a father or a brother who had a autism tattoo?
A
And they
brother,
used
I
that
think,
to
yeah.
say, yeah, they used that to say he was a gang member. I'm like, what gang is that? It doesn't make sense. Um, but so migrant workers are disappearing. They're being disappeared by this current administration, as well as choosing to leave voluntarily because of the threat of being deported or otherwise harmed. Um, and RFK has also proposed, and he's been talking about this for years, what he wants to call wellness farms and reparenting farms, or camps, whichever one, where he wants to send people with disabilities, mental illness, and apparently all Black children. That's what he has said in the past, is that all Black children need to be reparented because they are all on some kind of a psychiatric medicine. And it's not even true, obviously. But it's just ableism and racism and putting targets on people's backs. So who is going to replace the migrant workers who are being disappeared? It will be the people that he is targeting on this registry.
I feel like everything that is happening right now has already happened. If you just look at, I mean, even more recently, but if you look at 100 years ago, it's as if we're following the same pattern, like over again, because I've heard all of these things before. We've seen this pattern happen before, and it's not just like it happened over in, Europe or anything. It happened here as well. So, yeah, I feel like every time I see a news, blurb or whatever, I feel like, we've seen this before, we've heard this before, and pick up a history book and just read it. Not every history
They're
book.
trying to get rid of history books
Right.
too.
Not every history book. Yeah, right. The ones that they ban, pick those
Terrible.
up.
Yeah.
Pick those up.
It's not funny. I'm horrified, which is why I'm laughing, because I laugh when I'm horrified. But it's it's pretty terrible. There is no redemption for a lot of the stuff they're saying and doing. And I can't make sense of it, but we can, do our best to resist. In 2017, I live in Minnesota, and in 2017, there was a senator who proposed an autism registry here. And the community pushed back pretty hard. It was actually, interestingly, shortly after a visit from RFK Jr., sorry. He came to Minnesota and he had some anti-vax events, and he was targeting the immigrant community, specifically the Somali community here in Minnesota. And then we had a measles outbreak. Does this sound familiar to anyone? So Minnesota pushed back, the disability community pushed back really hard, and the same senator ended up putting together a work group in the Minnesota State Senate. And I was part of that for a few years while it still existed. And I mean, that was, I guess, a good way for it to turn out. But I think it's really important for us as a community to push back and be like, we don't need you to track us, because now they're saying it's going to be a dashboard, but it's the same thing. It's a database of everyone's health history. And I want to be really clear that in order to have a database or a registry like this, by accessing people's medical records, educational records, etc., they are taking everyone's records, not just autistic people. They are taking everyone's private medical records and putting them into a database. And they will filter through. And they're not only collecting data about autism or co-occurring disabilities, they will have access to reproductive records. They will have access to all of a person's medical history for everyone. And I don't think that that is appropriate for the government to do at all.
Someone asked, is it legal? Can they do that?
Strangely,
so, I mean,
they can,
yeah, like
actually.
there are laws, right? There's HIPAA and FERPA, but there's also
when they claim that it's a public health thing, they can collect data. So similar to local public health agencies usually have information about transmittable diseases. So like HIV, they report cases of HIV. They report cases of other communicable diseases. So there is somewhat of a precedent for government agencies to collect healthcare data, but not to this extent. I don't think they've ever done anything like this before, and especially not in a way that we can't opt out.
yeah, and usually though, like typically those are not they're not linking a name with, that's not a registry, that's really reporting on health data as in like numbers, and so they wouldn't be including a name and address and all of that with, that's not a registry, that's really typically that's a little different.
Yeah.
But again,
I don't
someone
know,
says the
but
laws have not stopped them so far. And then, you get, I mean, we've seen this a couple years ago when they did this in one of the states, and it took like, courts coming in to stop it. But by then they had already done it. So yeah.
yeah. Well, and we already have like prevalence studies, like the ADDM, it's the autism. Oh, I can't remember what it stands for, but it's essentially they count how many 4-year-olds and 8-year-olds have been identified as autistic. So we already have prevalence information like that. So there's really not a point for a registry or a dashboard or whatever, other than they want everyone's private medical information, and they're going to use autism as the scapegoat for obtaining that. I don't know. And like the courts could step it in and declare it illegal, as someone said in the comments or in the chat, but this administration is not necessarily complying with orders from the courts. So what do we do with that?
All right. Well, let's conclude that topic. Your
Yeah.
turn. You
My
can give me a
turn.
question.
Okay, I will. I know there's a really important question that I alluded to a moment ago that I want you to answer. And it's parents who have a child with high support needs don't feel much in common with the parents of kids with lower support needs and don't feel a great connection with the neurodiversity movement. Some parents of children with high support needs say they appreciate RFK Jr. recognizing the challenges they face. Can you please address this divide between parents of children with high versus low support needs?
That also has a lot of layers to it. We talk about this several different times in our book, actually, about support needs and the neurodiversity movement and the language surrounding it. And I have 2 children that have varying support needs, right? I have one who has very high support needs and one who has less support needs. And I feel like there's like a misunderstanding about how services work from the very beginning. When parents are going to get services and they're looking for help, and which I understand because I was there not too long ago. I feel like they think that calling their kid profound or severe or level 3 or whatever it is going to get them those services when it does not. So when you go to get services like if you're going for like a Medicaid waiver or you're going for SSI or you're going to do this, all of those different entities have their own assessments. And it's not based off of what the diagnosis is. It's not based off of how many diagnoses the child has. It's based off of what specific support needs the kid has, and so that's in terms of like activities of daily living, medical needs, etc. And so I feel like that misunderstanding kind of gets in the way of people who are saying like, oh, profound and severe and all of that. And then once you kind of learn that that's not even really that helpful for your case as as somebody who is applying for services for your kids, a lot of the times parents kind of understand, oh, well, maybe we need to be more specific. And that's kind of what I did. And also, if you start learning from adults who are similar to your kids in support needs and in support needs, you start learning how your kids might feel, if that makes any sense. When Jules and I met early on, and we talk about this in the book, she was telling me, because I was kind of, venting in a post one time about like how hard things are, right? Like I didn't have any services, I didn't have any support, I didn't even understand what AAC was, my kids were not communicating. And I wrote a post, and Jules kind of came at me and said, your kids might read this one day. So
How is that coming at you?
Well, not coming at me, but you came.
I'm just kidding.
You came to
no,
talk.
but
Yeah.
that's how it feels.
Yeah,
That's
it
how
did
it
feel like
It
that.
feels like an attack.
I felt attacked. Like, who is this person who can read and write and comprehend and all of these things, telling me about my kids who are, and back then I would use the word severe, right? Because that's the words I was taught. But once I started learning from adult autistic people who were very similar to my son, non-speakers, AAC users, people who spell to communicate, I started understanding that, they can hear me talking about them. They can understand what I'm saying. They can intuitively feel how I'm feeling. When I'm venting to somebody or when I'm talking about how hard things are, yeah, they hear that and they understand that. And once I learned that, it changed everything for me. And I would hope that more parents would start learning from autistic adults who have higher support needs, who are non-speaking, who have those co-occurring conditions, who might have intellectual disabilities, or who people may have thought had intellectual disabilities, and then they access communication. Like, I would like for more parents to learn from those autistic people. And I'm sorry, this is like so ADHD of me, but like in our area, we just had a profound autism conference. We did. And these are parents that, I interact with regularly. We do policy work together sometimes. We do. And to see that some are actively ignoring what the autistic community is saying is disappointing to me. And also, and we'll talk about the divide between the parents of high support needs kids and maybe lower support needs kids. I think that I'm privileged because I have both. So I have the perspective of supporting both. I have the perspective of seeing the differences and how they're not that different, because the kids who parents deem as like, my kid is high functioning, they love to say that. They have their own really unique needs, and they are not to be dismissed, right? So when we're talking about self-harm, we're talking about suicidal ideation, we're talking about that negative self-talk, the anxiety that these kids whose parents really loved talking about being high functioning or low support needs, they have really high support needs, as it turns out. They just look different. And as a parent who also parented older kids who were not autistic and who didn't need services, I also have the perspective of how hard that was as a parent. That raising them was not easy. And so some of the times I think that, parents are kind of stuck in what they know and what they're experiencing. And especially parents who only have one child and that child is autistic. They don't have anything else to compare it to. So I think that the more we talk, the more we collaborate with others, the more we hear each other's stories, the more we'll see that we have in common than not in common. Because raising kids that weren't autistic it had its own challenges. And I am thankful to know that when something happens, when things don't go as planned, I don't always blame autism, right? Because I know that these things happen with kids that are neurotypical as well. So there's a lot of layers to it, and hopefully I'm just like not rambling like a nut, but there's just so many layers to it. And I think that we can all find a lot more common ground if we listen to the autistic community and learn and really grow from the autistic community, and also if we listen to each other more and compare these stories and compare like what's going on, not compare, but share with each other.
Yeah.
That's my take on it.
I have a follow-up question, Megan. How are your kids doing with reading now? They're learning to read?
Oh yeah. I totally missed your joke. Yes, they are. They are learning to read. And they're actually they're reading pretty well, I would say. They are not at the same level, and they don't need to be, but they are making progress, and they just they are going to be able to read what I write. And actually, they are very interested when they see mom stuff on social media, because they are also into social media and YouTube, and they're like, oh, mom has a video. And I'm like, what did I say in this one? But no,
Uh-oh.
for the
Yeah.
most part, I think it's all good. But yeah, they we talk a lot about this in the book. We talk a lot about parenting in the book, and just the different perspectives that everybody comes with, and how what we do and what we say affects them. And I was at an ARC of Virginia conference a couple years ago, and a woman stood up, because there were policymakers there, and they were talking to us about, whatever, all the great things they were doing. And a woman stood up and said, I'm advocating for this service and this waiver and this, and I should not have to humiliate my child to get services for him. And that stuck with me until now. I mean, it's been years, and she was so right. And we don't need to, right? Like, I feel like being really specific about the support needs they require. I think that's something that's helpful, in modeling language to each other about, like, okay, so instead of saying severe, what does that even mean? Tell me what that looks like. How does that show up for your kid? And let's be super specific about that. And then, honestly, something that was really helpful to me was looking at the criteria of the tests, of the assessments, of the screenings. They're all public. So if you're going for this assessment, you're going for this waiver, you can look up what the test is. You can look up what the screening looks like, so that you can not curate answers, but so that you can formulate answers that, one, don't dehumanize your kid, but two, are very accurate in the supports that they require. And you don't have to use the word like profound, and like, whose kid wants to hear that?
Well, and ultimately, it doesn't even matter when you're applying for services and supports, because it's like Medicaid waivers are based pretty much entirely on ADLs, and a little bit, like a tiny bit on behavior, like a tiny bit for real, and then IADLs. And if you don't know what ADLs are, it's like the activities of daily living, and it's like eating, showering, or bathing, toileting, grooming, and there's and mobility. So those are the 5 areas that a Medicaid waiver is really based on. And if a person has a disability and they need supports in those areas, and they meet the criteria for the nursing level of care, how that's determined, I don't really know how that's determined exactly, but I know that when you're applying for the waiver, you want to make sure that you are prepared to describe any and every support need that a person has with their ADLs. We don't have to speak about that in a nasty way. And something that I have seen that is really disturbing to me is some of the parents who use that harmful language or hurtful ableist language. They'll insult their own child based on toileting support needs. And it's like, and they'll use that also to speak negatively to autistic adults. And something that people have said to me before is like, well, you can wipe your own ass. And I'm like, I'm so sorry for the language. But that is a real thing that parents, like, that's how some parents speak to autistic adults. And it's like, well, if I couldn't, that doesn't make me any less valuable as a person. And it just means
And I wouldn't
I
tell
would need some
you.
support. Right. It's not
Like,
anybody's
that's
business.
not
It's
your
very
business.
private. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. But I think that sometimes parents don't know that you can just, you know, have some privacy for your kid, protect your kid's privacy, and speak in humanizing terms. Because quite frankly, we were all in diapers at one point, and if we live long
And
enough,
we'll
we will
be
all be
again.
back in them. So why does it matter? So it's just super frustrating, but there are definitely ways to qualify for supports and services while still using humanizing language that is, respectful. And we don't need to put anybody's business like out on the internet without their consent like that,
Yeah, the
you know?
only people that need to know about your kids' toileting needs are the people who you're, applying for services from and
Mhm.
whoever is caring for your kid. I think that the rest it's not because it's shameful, it's because it's private. So, yeah. And someone
Yeah.
said sometimes the adults who are similar are hard to find, but I agree that's such a great tip. And yeah, you're right. They are like sometimes they can be harder to find, but social media has been really great about connecting those people. And then like the more like if you find one person that you can really relate to, then they will introduce you to another person because everyone that I know is collaborating. Everyone that I know is sharing each other's posts. So if you find one person, dig into what they're talking about. Who are they talking about? Who are they sharing stuff with? Who are they sharing stuff by? Like, I think social media has been great in that way.
Mhm. Yeah. There's another question that it looked like wasn't coming through. Somebody asked if I was saying that putting a child in a mainstream environment schooling situation is more beneficial than a segregated school or classroom with other autistic kids. Yes, absolutely. But those classrooms have to be organized and prepared to integrate abled and disabled kids together. You can't just shove a disabled kid into a regular classroom, like a mainstream classroom, without making sure that it's accessible to the student, and making sure that their needs will be met in that environment. And also there's something to say for abled kids learning how to be decent human beings towards disabled people. So everyone benefits from integrated classrooms. And I know Meghan has a lot to say about that. She actually attended an inclusive preschool her own self when she was young.
I
So
did.
Meghan, what do you want to add on to that? Because I know you got stuff.
I have so much to say about that. Like you're right on track with that. Like, yes, everybody benefits, but it does take planning, it takes being proactive, it takes intent on making sure that those kids are being supported, making sure that people are aware of ableism. I think that's something that gets missed a lot in the schools. Like, okay, so this person, okay, they have this, and this accommodation. But if you bring them into a classroom that has a culture of ableism and maybe not even intentional, right? I'm not even saying like, oh, this teacher is ableist. But if the teacher's never like really learned about ableism, it just happens and it's not helpful, right? So then you get more tokenism, and that's not helpful to a kid. I do understand the notion of putting neurodivergent kids together. I understand the notion of putting like having a group of neurodivergent kids in a class and having that be a benefit. And I think that would be a benefit if it was also led by a neurodivergent person who knows they're neurodivergent and is trained in ableism as well. Because so I think part of it's more of like an idealistic notion to think of, oh, well, don't we want our kids to be together? Absolutely. We want our kids to be together. We want our kids to have neurodivergent friends. We want them, of course we do. However, we don't necessarily want them to come together in this certain environment that doesn't foster neurodivergent thinking or foster neurodivergent play or, really think that stuff is valid and great, right? So I don't think this inside the system is where we should be focusing our groups and socialization with other neurodivergent kids. I think that inclusion is the best environment for everyone. Like Jules said, I was I was in an inclusive environment in preschool back in the early 80s. My mom started a preschool, and I was reverse included with the disabled kids in there, right? So I know how beneficial it is. And I think that that even really helped me like develop in ways that that maybe I wouldn't have developed in the first place, right? And so like when we have inclusive environments, everybody benefits, and that is the other kids as well, right? Because now we are starting to talk about universal design of learning, because even if other kids are not identified as having a disability, we know that there are a lot of them that do, and we know that there are some that just learn differently. And so if you have that universal design of learning just as standard, then everybody benefits from it. But like Jules said, it does take intentionality. And if you're a parent, it takes a lot of work on the parent's part. It takes a lot of focus on what's going on. It takes a lot of advocating for even like minute things that you might, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to be to be in that inclusive environment. And I'll just say, like, so my kid, who is mostly non-speaking, is an AAC user. He's in 5th grade right now. He is fully included in the gen ed setting, and he is thriving. And when I tell you the mountain that we had to climb to get there, and every time something didn't work, he was to blame, right? So he had to prove and earn his spot in this regular place that everybody else is. So I do know how tiring it is. I know how much effort it takes on the part of parents, and I think it's completely worth it. I do. And also on the other side of that, if you have a setting or a school or a system that is actively harming your kid, I would pull my kid in a heartbeat.
Yoink.
Yeah.
And that's a situation my family was in, trying to fight for special education services like appropriately for them.
Right.
It was unbearable. And so we opted out, and we've homeschooled, we've done out of district school.
I mean, there's that side as well. Like sometimes it just, you're not making enough headway. Your kid is coming home stressed out. Your kid is having school avoidance. That's trauma. It's active trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And no, it's not. That's not worth it. It's not worth it. So yes, it's worth it, and no, it's not worth it. So there is no right answer.
Depends on the situation. Yeah, because every school is different. Every district is different. And there were times that we had an excellent school district, and they went over like above and beyond for my kids. And I know how good it can be. So that's why it's so frustrating when it's not what it should be at a bare minimum. So yeah, so there's another question. I don't want to like skip over everything. So I'm going to ask you another question, Megan. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. How and when do we discuss a child's diagnosis with a child, and what guidance do we give for a child talking about their diagnoses with others? So that's 2 questions.
Okay,
How and when?
Okay, so I do not have any right answers on this. I'll just go ahead. Can we like rap about this? Because
Yeah.
I feel like it's so complex, and it really depends on the kid, and it depends on the adults in the kid's life, and it depends on how that kid is being treated about different things, and how much anxiety that kid has, and how much exposure that kid has to just outside in the world. I think it just all depends on everything. I feel like that's such an individualized question. And so you can correct me. I mean, I feel like there has been people saying, oh, you should tell them as early as possible. And I do think that talking about differences in brains and sensory and all of that stuff should just be part of the conversation. Like, oh, mommy's brain can't handle it, too much stimulus, like that kind of stuff. I feel like that is really good to have early on, so that it's just always a part of the conversation. And we talk about this a little bit in the book as well. And I think that even since the book, I've had even more thoughts on it, because it's just not as clear cut as that. You give your thoughts, because I like your thoughts today. Yeah, do that.
My thoughts, I think that kids should know as soon as we know. But the way that we approach the topic with our kids is really important. So when I talked to my kids, when I told them, it wasn't like you have this disability, or you have this whatever. That's not how we discussed it. I would kind of like back into the conversation. I would be like, well, a lot of autistic kids experience this thing that you're experiencing. Or if my kid asked me, and he used to ask me every now and again, probably every 2 months or so, he would be like, Mom, what is autism again? And so I would be like, I have a really short description. So it's social communication sensory disability. And then I don't think you should necessarily explain it that way to your kids right away. But my kid already knew what it was at this point. So quick reminder. And then I would relay a similar story, like something to help it make sense. So I'd be like, you know how you have a hard time talking to new people on the playground, like you want to play, but you just can't approach somebody and you can't ask them to play?
A
A
lot of
lot of
autistic,
autistic people experience that. And I think it's really important to frame it in that way because it makes them feel less alone. If you say a lot of autistic people experience that, a lot of autistic people feel that way, it validates their perspective, makes them feel less alone, and provides information about their disability. So I think kids should know right away. But you don't have to make it a big deal about the diagnosis specifically. It can just be like part of your regular conversations with your kids. And if it makes them uncomfortable, you don't necessarily have to talk about it all the time. You can, just answer when they have questions or something like that. But having information and insight like that is going to help kids develop skills. It's going to help them know more about themselves. They'll know how to better advocate for themselves. So it's just really important to have that good information, how it applies to them specifically, because we know autism is a spectrum and everybody is different. No two people's autism are the same. So there's not like a single way to describe it. It has to be specific to that particular child, if
And
that
can I
makes sense.
piggyback on that? I love all
Yeah,
of that. I'm like
always.
learning so
Come
much
on.
today. But I think that when those conversations start happening, so I have one of my kids is more of like he likes to talk and work it out with like different folks. I think that it is also important to bring in the other adults who are around him or around them. So like if they have teachers, if they have, principals, or they have, other family members that they might be talking to about this, making sure that those people have the language to support that, because I don't trust other people to not harm my kid with their ableistic whatever. And again, not intentional, but just what their knowledge base is of being autistic, having autism, however they say it. So I think that it's important to like really loop in other people. And so I think that one of my kids was asking a lot about it, and we're talking a little bit about it, like figuring it all out. And so I let them know, like, he is interested in this. We are talking about this, and we are coming at it at a very neutral way. Here's an article about how to do that. Here's some language you can use. Here's a book that you could offer him. I think that books are really good at allowing people to discover and to learn about things on their own time. And it's not hostile. It's not like anything that people are going to get their guards up about. They can really do it on their own. So I've really been into the book side of things. Like the one with Yen Perkins and Tanya Masterman, gosh, I'll find it in a second. I really like that. It's kind of like a Diary of a Wimpy Kid type of feel to it, that like for teens and tweens. I really like that one, so he can kind of start learning about it. And I know that it's not going to be an ableist type of language. And then even be able to like journal about his own experiences. I think that has been really beneficial so far.
Mm-hmm.
And even sharing that with the teachers, because it's a really easy read. It's for kids. Sharing that with the teachers and saying, hey, this is how we're talking about it. You know, this is how he's learning about it. This is what this is the type of language, this type of rhetoric I expect from the adults around. And then like really reinforcing that, because you want those teachers to start advocating for those kids as well, in that similar type of way, because there's other people at the school or at the wherever they are that are not in those conversations, that they might hear them talking about it in a different type of way. So you want them to start advocating the same way you are advocating for, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, I like that. I think, well, I have a big library of autism and disability books and stuff like that too. So Megan has a book club on Facebook. It's called That Awesome Book Club, but it's AUSOME.
Yeah, it's like
Is that what
AU-SOME, that awesome book club. We actually have 16,000 members now, not 15.
That's wild. That's really good.
It is kind of wild, actually.
Did you find the book? I was looking at my bookshelf to see if I had it up here, and I don't remember.
I bet you I like handed my copy out. Oh, here it is. I'm always handing my copies out. I need to stop doing that. Here it is. It's called the Awesome Autistic Go-To Guide. And so it like has some journaling things in it, and like bullet point stuff over here, some journaling stuff over here. It talks about like becoming dysregulated and like, oh, can you think of some times or some, so it's like really SEL stuff as well.
Yeah.
Just kind of learning about yourself. Yeah. So like talks about triggers and where they can happen. Like talks about meltdowns and shutdowns. Really gives them those words to use. I really like it.
Yeah.
I do.
It's good. I know, I just realized my copy is definitely downstairs because kids are downstairs. There's
Oh, the autistic scientist. Hi. Yes. Thank you, Jen. Okay, good. Y'all got it.
yes. And
We
then
really need to work on updating those lists, though. If anybody wants to help you girl out, we can tackle that together.
heck yeah.
Okay, what's the next question, Jules?
Okay, I'll go and okay, transitioning to adulthood. What opportunities are there for employment and or living independently? How do we set up a consistent support system for their adult life?
I'm gonna let you take this one, but also I do know it's like state specific. Well, it'll
Very
have different
state-
answers. So yeah, so I'm gonna let you take this one because I'm not there.
Well, I'm gonna start with the opportunities for employment. I mean, disabled people can work anywhere that disabled people want to work. We work everywhere in every industry, every company. Well, not every company, but every major company. So really we can do whatever. So the opportunities like for support are things like voc rehab. So vocational rehab exists in every state, and they are meant to help people gain employment. So that's one support. But there are other things as well. Like there's independent living skills workers who can help. Um, I'm not sure if like PCAs can do certain things to support employment, but definitely like people who have waivers and they have direct support professionals, or not a PCA, but like a support person. They can probably help with applying like skills, like soft job skills, I think are one of the things that a lot of autistic people struggle with because it's executive functioning. It's almost purely executive functioning. So having some support with that, maybe with an occupational therapist, or I learned that speech language pathologists can help support executive functioning as well. So if somebody has speech therapy, maybe that would be a good source of support for like developing those soft job skills. Um, but and it depends on every state is different. Like in Minnesota where I live, the state has a program called Connect 700. So that means a disabled person who wants to certify as qualified for this program can send a medical verification that they have a disability. Specifically, autism qualifies. And then the state certifies that uh, they meet the requirements for the program. And then the person, when they apply for a job with the state, like any job, pretty much every job uses this. They can skip certain parts of the interview process and basically just do a tryout of the job. If they're qualified for the job, they're placed as a probationary status. And then if they're doing well, they continue on in the job as like their full-time thing. So, but that again is state specific. But a lot of states have unique programs to help people gain employment and stay employed.
So can I, and so I'll piggyback on that. So I just took on a role I'm in Virginia, and we have every state has a parent training center. And so you might want to look that up I think on understood.com, they have a list of parent training centers in every state. And I will say not every parent training center is equal, but our parent training center has a lot on transition to adulthood, and we have a ton of resources. It just varies so much state to state, but there are resources available, and there's like Jules was talking, like there's right to work, and really it's so dependent on the person and their interests, and and somebody in the chat earlier asked about, or maybe in the questions we got, like if they can be independent. And I think that a lot of parents, that's the question, right? That's like the end result. Like, is my kid going to be able to be independent and work a job and support themselves? And I think that is the wrong question to be asking. That's what I think. I think that recognizing that we are very interdependent on each other, and recognizing that this whole independent after 22 years old thing is just not even the way life has been going on for 2,000 years. And this is a very, what do you call that? Consumer capital. What is it called that you do? What's the word?
The colonial capitalism.
Very specific to this society in this very specific time. And we're seeing now that even that's phasing out because it's not affordable, right? Just period. And this doesn't have anything to do with disability. It just it has to do with community and supporting each other and being interdependent. And this focus on independence. Oh, sorry, my dog is barking. This focus on independence is the wrong focus to have. I think that we should be thinking about what would be like best for our family, or best, what would be more supported. Sorry, my dog. You can keep going.
Okay. So I agree with everything you just said, and I would add that some people will never live independently, and that's okay. I mean,
I do
that
not live
doesn't-
independently. I do not.
me neither. Um,
I bet my
but
mom is in here right now. I
she
bet
is. She
Barb is in
actually
here.
she sent a message a little while ago about you started inclusive preschool when you were 6 weeks old. I saw that and thought that was adorable.
Yeah, I am
Um,
not independent.
no.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. But I understand the fear, right? Because as parents, we want to make sure that our children are going to be taken care of after we're long gone. Um, and that's a real concern. Um, but our role as parents, do what we can, but also set them up for success. Like planning for their care after you're gone as a parent, meaning you have already chosen a potential guardian if that's the, level of care that they need. Um, identifying a guardian, doing all the paperwork to make sure that somebody will be there to support them and make sure that they're doing okay, that their rent is paid, that they have food to eat, that they have their services, etc. So that's what we have to do as parents. All we have to do is prepare.
And I like looking up ABLE accounts versus disability trusts and learning about those different, the different options that you might have. Life insurance policies. I mean, all of these things are things that, we should be looking into, just to ensure that. And somebody said, what if you don't have that person?
That's a really good question, and it is a difficult situation to be in. And at the same time, there are agencies that can take on that responsibility. Um, so if you have to hire an agency to do that, then that's what you kind of got to do. But we do the best we can with what we have. Um, and if all we can do is prepare and make sure our kids are set up for success, then that's what we have to do. That's our responsibility to our kids. Um, but I think pushing all of that responsibility on someone who may not be able to live independently, that's unfair to them. What is fair to them is making sure that they have what they need. Um, I mean, this is really morbid, though.
So Alex has a question.
Yeah.
Hey, Alex. Oh, I don't know if Alex. Okay, there you go.
He's
Hey, Alex.
unmuted now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Well, this is all great, Megan, Jules. I just wanted to mention, honestly, I just wanted to, no, not so much a question, just wanted a comment, I guess. This is great, of course. If I just may toot my own horn for a moment, I was the very first person ever to get a copy of the book anywhere, as you know.
I totally believe that, Alex.
Well, you said it to me and you told me so. Yeah, I was and of course, and Jen, I believe, is on this call. We are pretty much the biggest promoters of this book in Canada. You may also recall I promoted that book on our local morning news show about 2 years back.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah, I
Yes.
remember that. I watched the segment. That was really cool.
Yes. Uh, so yeah, because just want to say here yeah, this April has been a shit show to say the least. I mean, obviously in the States, of course, but also See, here in Nova Scotia, they're working on a Nova Scotia Autism Action Plan, and while it looks good on the face of it, I have had some very serious concerns about the way it's all being handled. I'd have to tell you, we'd have to have a separate Zoom call for that to outline all those, to be honest, Megan. But yeah, and also there's this proposed national autism strategy, which is also the Autistic Run orgs here also have some major concerns about that as well. But really, Megan, at some point, you and I need to have another Zoom call so we can discuss the this proposed autism action plan for Nova Scotia in more detail, even though it isn't out yet. But yeah, we should
I love that. Yeah.
we should do that soon. Yeah.
I think it's such a good, I think one of the best strategies that I found is asking questions like with these strategies and these, like, you know, all these statements and like, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. The best question that I've started asking is, you know, is this led by autistic people, or what do autistic people think about this? Or have you gotten insight from the autistic community on this? And like really leaving it up to them is such a good strategy, because the answer is always like no. The answer is like almost always no.
They apparently are getting significant input from the autistic community, but I've been hearing some major issues on this. So, like I said, you and I have to have a Zoom call about this, like ASAP, like next week, like soon. And also, not to just if I may be so bold here, I just want to quickly promote the upcoming ASR conference next week. If you're not going to that, I suggest you both sign up for that because it's going to be great.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex.
You know what that is? It's the Beyond Behaviorism conference hosted by the Alliance Against
Oh yeah,
Exclusion.
absolutely.
Meghan, Jules, if you haven't signed up for this yet, please do it. Please do it pronto, because I know you're gonna love this.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, we got another, let's see.
Uh,
Jenny.
We
Yes,
got
we have another
another-
question.
Yeah, and actually, okay, so this question is about ABA and other behavior therapy. I want to go to that actual question that we were given in the Google Doc. Hold on a second, let me find it. Hold up. Where'd it go? Okay, so here's the question. I get that this is for you.
This is for me?
Yeah.
Okay.
I get that some adults with autism who experience ABA as a child have shared that they have felt it was harmful. However, I also know that parents with kids with significant needs, nonverbal need assistance with ADLs, etc., have shared that ABA has been helpful. I'm wondering, where do we come to an understanding about what are the harmful parts? In addition to parents with kids who need more, what are the affirming practices that are now being offered to kids? Okay, so go ahead.
Okay. That's a good question.
It's an entire topic.
It is. So I don't know if this is necessarily a perspective that's only shared by parents of kids with high support needs. I think that there are parents of kids across and throughout the entire spectrum who think the ABA has been helpful. And I think that we need to rely a little bit more on empirical data and not necessarily, you know, it helped us because my kid is complying more, that kind of perspective, because I don't know if that's the goal we should have, is just making sure our kids comply with directives. So ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, it's a behavior modification program. It is often called a therapy. It's not a therapy. And it is sometimes prescribed, I guess, for up to 40 hours a week. for a single kid. It's like a full-time job. And so basically, ABA uses like rewards and punishments to make kids behave a certain kind of way. And they're supposed to learn to do something and have zero errors or error free. I can't remember what the phrase is. But it doesn't help. Like the punishments, aversives, whatever you want to call it, it's traumatizing. And the rewards are really weird because why are we giving children Skittles for repeating a word that we said or, whatever. It just is a weird thing. And there's this idea that kids are gaining meaningful skills that they can't gain anywhere else. And I don't know, I'm having a hard time like articulating it. But yeah.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
So I think that just from a parenting, like humanistic view, I think that when we use ABA to teach life skills like ADLs, like buttoning their shirt and eating with a fork, we are assuming that they don't want to learn those things. I think that is something that I've kind of learned over the years is that, because what it is like, okay, if you do this, I'll give you a cookie. That's like the basics of it, right? Like that's the basis of it. And so we're assuming that they don't want to learn those things. And that in itself is kind of harmful. And also, I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. ABA is like completely unregulated.
Yep.
So unregulated. So when we have this so many different versions of how ABA was, right? Like, oh, well, this was like my kids had it and it was like this. My kids had it and it was like this. Like there's so many different variables in it that, okay, maybe you had ABA, but they weren't doing ABA, or maybe they were like, it's not regulated. So maybe you had somebody that really liked kids and wanted to work with kids and wasn't doing ABA, and that's why it wasn't harmful. Like ABA in itself, I feel is harmful. Also, they will give you 40 hours like that. And so there's childcare, right? Like there's a whole lot of levels to every conversation we have. And so when a kid is 3, they're not potty trained, the parents are just they're not able to go to daycare because they're not taking a 3-year-old that's not potty trained. And here is this 40 hours of whatever on a silver platter, and you don't even have to pay for it. There's value in that.
There is.
No question.
And at the same time, so some people might take advantage of that because they want childcare, and other people are coerced because it is the only thing that exists so that they can survive. Like the parent, maybe the kid was kicked out of preschool or, dealing with school stuff, and the parent has to work to pay the rent.
Exactly. These
families
are struggling.
They're desperate.
And here, take this.
Mm-hmm.
Because Medicaid's paying for it in a lot of states. They're paying for it and they're not regulating it. They're
billions of dollars a year. Billions of tax dollars a year go to ABA.
I did the math on my twins, and if we were to bill Medicaid for 40 hours a week of ABA, which they're approved for, they can get that right now if I wanted it. They're approved for that 40 hours, and I saw the pay scales and the pay, how they pay it out. That's $250,000 a year. Unregulated, And so
Yeah.
I think part of the
Without
discussion needs to be harm reduction.
Mhm.
And so if somebody said, what about the intersection of race and disability? Everything Jules and I talk about has
Oh.
that in mind. So we're talking about these families that can't get daycare. Their kids were kicked out of daycare. They need to pay the rent. That's what we're talking about.
Mhm.
Harm reduction is important. So yeah, you can choose. Like you're the boss. The family is the boss in the ABA home ABA world. So you can set up parameters for what you allow and what you don't allow. You can set up expectations. You can be there with them. You can say what you expect. And I think there is value in that as well. I think
But
that
I
it's
mean,
more to it.
ultimately, like, it is not effective at improving long-term outcomes.
Right.
The Department of Defense released a study a few years ago showing that, like, what was it, 6% of kids maybe had a little bit of improvement, and
And
8% had
those
worsening.
6% were gonna like they were growing up anyway. Like they were.
So, right. So the DoD said, it's not cost effective, because it's so much money and it doesn't improve long-term, like, outcomes. It doesn't improve skills. Like, if a kid is going to learn how to talk, the kid is going to learn how to talk. An ABA,
Could
like,
hinder that.
behavior techs,
Could
they're
hinder
not
that.
even qualified to teach language. And if you want your child to have access to communication, would you prefer to have a high school graduate, or would you prefer to have a speech language pathologist who is an expert in helping people communicate? I'm choosing the speech language pathologist. I'm choosing, that not a daycare situation, because essentially that's what it is for a lot of families, is a daycare. And
And
there's
that's valid.
also but it's traumatizing as well. Like, people talk about now the new ABA. There is no new ABA, but they talk about, oh, we don't have aversives anymore. So an aversive is like a punishment. But they do, because withholding a reward is a punishment. You tell me going to class and all the kids who were rewarded for the week with a pizza party, are going into this room to have their pizza party and you can't go. Don't tell me that's not a punishment.
And that's what positive behavioral reinforcement is that, like, so they weren't going to get it in the first place. So if we put it up there, then that is the positive. Like, so if we put it there and take it away, that's still positive because they weren't going to get it in the first place.
It's so
Life
weird.
doesn't work like that with kids.
No, it doesn't.
No.
It's exploitative. They'll even exploit relationships between a child and the behavior tech, because the children generally, they'll develop a good relationship with that person that's working with them 40 hours a week. But then as soon as the aversives and rewards and whatever aren't working, they'll change the prize that the kid is supposed to work towards. So they'll take away that behavior tech until whatever. But then I also want all of you to, like, imagine when you were a little kid and somebody was pretending they couldn't see you, and they were pretending you were invisible and all this stuff. And they're like, oh, I wonder where so-and-so is. And you'll be right there and you're talking to them, but they're ignoring you, and how frustrating that is. Apparently, Medicaid is paying behavior techs to do this to young children. Like,
And it's
imagine
not
how
just,
frustrating that is.
and let's say, like, we also need to say that it's not just ABA and these private, companies. It's also in the schools. They're teaching them planned ignoring. I did write 2 articles on ABA on Neuroclastics website. I did it over there, and it talked about planned ignoring, and it talked about, like, what ABA is, and just like who is working with the kids. It's more of informative. And Rachel, you're so right. Like, you're so right about the comparing speech and ABA is not the same, right? So what we're doing is comparing ABA
Outcomes.
and daycare, really. I mean, it's ABA versus daycare versus early childhood special education. Really, those are the only settings that are comparable.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Dana has a question.
I don't see it.
There we go.
Oh,
So, hi, ladies. Really good conversation. As much as it pains me, the ABA conversation is a conversation that I feel like we lose a lot of motion in the community behind. I think the ABA conversation, the puzzle piece conversation, they're important, but I think we lose a lot of getting to the work that we could be doing by having those conversations. And I guess I want to provide some perspective as a provider, right? Being on the other end. My son has autism. I've always viewed autism through how Drayden, my son, appears with autism. And I have learned very quickly that things are different. And you guys had a good conversation earlier where you guys were talking about when people talk about high support needs. And a lot of time those parents feel left out. And I think that's really the root of it, what I'm seeing on my end, right? When you go in these homes, for me, autism's beautiful, Drayden's brain's different, he makes us laugh, he does all. But when you have kids that have complex disabilities where they're not getting services, no one's able to provide them services, they're getting up in age. It does start making families feel alone, and they start leaning into, because there's no community there, right? They start leaning into, I don't even know his name, RFK or whatever is going on. They lean into that because they start feeling those things he talks about. At least someone's talking to them, right? They feel alone, they feel isolated, they feel like, I want to prevent a family from ever feeling like this, because it does make them feel alone. As a provider, I'm able to see that, and has opened my eyes to also be receptive to what other people are going through, right? Because their lived experience is also sometimes very different than how we show up. I also want to provide, like, we have a lot of privilege, right? Being able to have these conversations and talk and do these things ourselves. But I come from a lot of families who parents can't read and write themselves, right? Or they're disabled or wasn't diagnosed or incorrectly diagnosed. So it puts another layer of complexity. And when we talk about ABA, I think for me, I would love to hear a lot more conversation around, like, not what the parent is choosing, but the choices they have to choose from. I think it's Jules who said, like, I would choose this, and that's great. I think there's privilege in being able to say what you would choose, because a lot of parents don't have choices, right? And so I think it's great that we're sharing this information and how it can be harmful, but also too, I want to be mindful and give space for parents and caregivers that are on the call, that harm reduction is important too, right? Your child's not doom and gloom. You're not a bad person if you're using ABA, because sometimes that's the best choice we have of none choices, right? When we look at something that's going to be 40 hours that we're not paying out of pocket, and we're looking for some type of help, and we can't get any caregivers, right? As a provider, I know how hard it is to get these physician staff. They're underpaid. They don't provide any benefits. And so if ABA is the only service that's going to come in and provide, I think that conversation around harm reduction is important. So what that looks like, I would love to see conversations about what's a checklist, what can we do, right?
I love that idea.
Yeah, we can hire a
Absolutely.
provider. You can request someone else. You can request that people respect your cultural accommodations, right? Cultural competency.
Yeah, because you're the boss. You
Right.
are the
And I would
boss,
like
right?
to empower parents instead of having the conversation about, like, this is so harmful, this is so bad, because the reality is those are conversations we need to have with lobbyists and policy writers, because parents don't get to choose, right? Like, that's the only option they have. And when you have that privilege where you can say, like, oh, I'm just not going to do it, then that's good, right? Like, you're able to, but some people can't, right? Like, that's just the reality that I'm seeing by going into homes, of seeing that it's not always an option for some people. They can't find daycare, even here for summer camps, right? they're saying, oh, it's a disabled summer camp, but they have to be potty trained. They have
What,
to
for
be
3 hours, and it's for 3 hours. What are you gonna
right.
do
And
then?
so
Right.
it's just like,
Right.
and so
No,
lots of great conversations, but I would love to see some resources around, hey, if we're going to use ABA, if that's a choice for you, how do we harm reduce? So that's my
I'd love to
that
even
is
partner with
super.
you on that. Honestly, we could partner with you on that, Dana, because you are like, and it does create such a different perspective. Like, a lot of the work we do is on social media, and a lot of the work that we do is like online. And but then when you get in the communities, I know Jules is in the community a lot, but like when you're dealing, like working with families, like in the community, not on social media, not for like platforms, like it is different. Like it is like you really see how much these families are struggling. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been there, but I'm privileged, right? But even with my privilege, I was struggling. Like my kids couldn't get in the daycare, like because of that. Like it is hard. I would love, yeah, that would be awesome. High functioning autism. Yeah. Oh, thank you for that. I've been so out of touch lately. High functioning autism has a resource about what to look out for in ABA. Very good. Thank you.
I just saw that the other day and it's really good. So that it is definitely a conversation to talk about harm reduction and other options because it is a systemic issue. And it is not, a family or a parent's like they didn't choose to be in the situation where that's the option that they have, the only option they have. And I think that's why Meghan talks about harm reduction and making sure you set parameters for your child being treated well. But there's also other programs as well. Like one that I really like is Skirts. It's SCERTS.
And that's berries, berry croissant
Yes.
thing.
Yep. Um, but there are options in some communities. None of my children ever had any kind of services when they were young, even though like one was a late speaker, etc. We had nothing. We had no information, we had no services, we had no supports. So I never was in the position to have to choose that. And in the book, I actually talked about before I learned more, if somebody would have told me that's what I should do for my kids, I probably would have done it until I learned more. So I don't think that that's, I think something that happens is parents feel like they're being blamed for being put into this situation with a colonial capitalism where they have to choose something other than what every other kid gets to do. And that's a conversation to be had as well, because if we had those inclusive learning environments, kids a lot of the time wouldn't have to go to ABA because that is what parents use for childcare a lot of the time because they don't have another choice. Um, and I don't want parents to feel blamed for being in that position. Um, so that's a really good reminder. And I just want to
Yeah.
say thank you to Dana for that.
Yeah, it is so, there are so many levels to it. And Dana, I feel like if it came off in that way, absolutely not. Like harm reduction is so valuable. And I know, like I was there, like you can't get your kids in daycare. And something that I have learned since then, like since I've been working on, in the parent training center and with the early intervention folks, is that Head Start, part of their grant, their funding, is that they have to have 10% of their kids have to have disabilities. And so that's something that could empower parents. Yep, 10% of their classrooms.
RFK Jr. is trying to shut down Head Start, though.
I know.
Isn't that
I
great?
know. But anyway, but
Which
if
is
if it's still there, like 10% of those classrooms have to have kids with disabilities, and that's part of their charter or whatever you call it. So there's another layer to that. And for parents that are watching this, like in Virginia, so IDEA says that schools need to take preschoolers at age 3. But like in Virginia, we take preschoolers with disabilities at age 2. So there's that. So there's, I feel like coming from it with harm reduction, which I would love to partner with, and also like empowering with more resources is helpful, because a lot of people just don't know that. Oh, no, who's going to tell you? Who's going to tell you?
I just want to jump in because it's 8:34 and I'm so sad that we have run out of time, because there's clearly so much more we could talk about, and I just want to thank you both, Megan and Jules, for saying out loud so many of the things that we wish we could talk about as an autism community. And a lot of these subjects have become so taboo, and people don't want to share. And I think that you've shown that there is a way that we can talk about these tough topics in a healthy way that benefits everybody. And I want to thank you for coming together and writing your book. I read it a while ago, and I have it on my shelf, and I'm so glad that we could bring your book to Maryland and Montgomery County, and it appears to be even more people outside of our state. So thank you so much. I want to thank everyone else for all your comments in the chat and sharing your thoughts. We will definitely make this recording available, and it will be on our YouTube channel. Daniel will put that link in the chat. But I also want to urge you, I know that, it's the end of the evening, but we do want to hear your thoughts, everyone who attended tonight. And if you have feedback for us, I swear it's really short. It's like, I think, 2 questions. We'll put a link to our feedback form in the chat. Just click on it. You can fill it out now or later, but let us know what you thought of tonight. And let us know what you'd like to hear more about. I would love to be able to continue the conversation and have these guys back. So let's see. So if you want to hear more about X-Minds, please go to our website, xminds.org. We've got an events calendar, and you can see what's coming up, both virtually and in person. And one last request, if you did find tonight valuable, and I just want to remind you that we don't charge for anything, and but we couldn't do what we do without everyone's contributions. And so, big or small, every penny counts. It helps us continue to provide this kind of programming. So, and to make it accessible to everybody. So please go to xminds.org/donate if you feel inclined to do that. Thank you so much, Megan and Jules, again for being our speakers this month, and to everyone who attended tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. It was good to be here.
Have a good night.
You too.